The following video is going to be a hard one. Viewer discretion is recommended, and if you have your children around you, maybe wait with this video until they're away. The complete report of the sexual crimes of Hamas, not singular horrors, but a tactical weapon. It was well noticed that there was repeated patterns in the sexual acts of violence, including the victims who were found naked, partly naked, or completely, when their hands were tied, often to trees or to poles. Eyewitnesses and hearing witnesses testified that at least 15 cases of sexual assaults, among them at least 4 of mass gang rapes and 3 cases of extreme violence in sexual organs. Now, these are the eyewitnesses that lived to come out and talk about it. I'm pretty sure there were much more that we'll never hear or know what happened. In most of the cases described, the victim of the rape was murdered immediately after the act, and as per few testimonies, sometimes the rape continued after the death. Rescue forces that reached to the area after the slaughter were describing that they've been seeing bodies that were left with objects that were inserted into some of their intimate private parts. There was a body of a woman that was located in Kibbutz Be'eri with a large metal object inside her vagina. There was a body of a murdered male that was found naked and tied with an object, a metal object that was inserted to his groins. Another male was found that was murdered with an object that was inserted into the inside of his penis. I'm translating this from Hebrew, so forgive me if I say some words wrongly. In the report is also mentioned the statement of one of the hostage survivors, Amit Susna, sharing that she was sexually assaulted at gunpoint, beaten and chained with shackles on her ankles. He came to me, he pushed his weapon towards my forehead, he hit me, he dragged me into the children's room, a room full of posters of children, and then he put the gun at me and made me do sexual acts with him.
I was sexually assaulted by the Hamas terrorist who had guarded me. I was held captive alone, chained by my ankle. He forced me to go to the shower and entered the room, pointed his gun at me. Meticulously planned his assault, scheming and waiting for the moment to have his way. He kept asking me private sexual questions while sitting next to me in his underwear, lifting my shirt, touching me, and constantly asking me when my period would be over. I knew exactly what he was planning to do, and yet I couldn't do anything to prevent it. I was utterly helpless. When the assault was over, I wasn't even allowed to cry. I had no one to comfort me and was forced to act nice to the person who had just sexually assaulted me in the most horrifying way. Not a day goes by that I don't think about what that terrible man did to me. A few days later, I was transferred to a new location with different heavily armed Hamas terrorists. I was tortured, hung upside down, beaten, humiliated, and feared for my life. I was sexually assaulted by the Hamas terrorist who had guarded me. I was held captive alone, chained by my ankle. He forced me to go to the shower and entered the room, pointed his gun at me. Meticulously planned his assault, scheming and waiting for the moment to have his way. He kept asking me private sexual questions while sitting next to me in his underwear, lifting my shirt, touching me, and constantly asking me when my period would be over. I knew exactly what he was planning to do, and yet I couldn't do anything to prevent it. I was utterly helpless. When the assault was over, I wasn't even allowed to cry. I had no one to comfort me and was forced to act nice to the person who had just sexually assaulted me in the most horrifying way. Not a day goes by that I don't think about what that terrible man did to me. A few days later, I was transferred to a new location with different heavily armed Hamas terrorists. I was tortured, hung upside down, beaten, humiliated, and feared for my life.
That's the kind of people that Pierce Morgan lately is trying to defend. A former hostage and the partner of the hostage Matain Tsangauka, Ilana Gritsvetsky, while she was in the president's house in Israel when they revealed the finding of this article. For the men that got hurt and are choking in silence, for those who were murdered, and their voice will never be heard. And for my Matan and 49 more kidnapped, I come to you from here, on my side, the wife of the President of Israel, and to the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. Do not miss the opportunity of bring back the hostages. Sign the deal. Finish the war. Now let's watch a video of an interview talking about all these sexual assaults that happened to the victims of the Nova Party and many other victims on October 7.
Eyewitness who stepped forward, a young woman who hid in the bushes and described that very close to her, a few yards from her, there was a group of Hamas terrorists who pulled by the hair another woman who was stripped from the waist down.
הוא מושך לה בשיער, היה לה שיער ארוך, הוא מושך לה בשיער. היא לא לבושה, ובעצם אני מבינה שהוא אנס אותה, הוא בעצם משנע אותה. כאילו, ממש אני זוכרת את התמונה הזאת. ואז מעבירים אותה לעוד מישהו, והוא חותך לה את השד. הוא חותך לה את השד, הוא זורק את זה על הכביש, הם משחקים עם זה.
This is someone's daughter. This is someone's girlfriend. There were many cases where they amputated their breast. You know how evil and cruel and possessed you need to be to grab a screaming woman, and many of them were civilians, by the way. They were innocent Gazan civilians, not only Hamas people. A woman is being tied by a bunch of radical jihadist men, screaming, pleading. They tied her boyfriend in front of her, and they forced him to watch with a pistol in his mouth. That's one of the testimonies that I've heard before. They forced him to watch as they're raping his girlfriend. By the way, in some cases, they even use the facial recognition of the smartphone to open the phone and call a WhatsApp or a Facebook video with their family so the parents can see what's happening. And then holding the woman down as she's screaming and cutting off her breast with a knife. These are civilians. These are young men and women who just went to party, who just went to dance. And the problem that the West just doesn't want to talk about, that this behavior is glorified in Gaza. This behavior is not condemned in Gaza. Yes, there is probably some that condemn it, but they don't dare speaking because they're not the majority, they're a minority, and they are heavily oppressed. This behavior is very much glorified and encouraged from a young age. How do you think these men became so cruel, so evil to do these kind of things? They weren't born like that. They didn't wake up one day and decide they want to do that. They've been indoctrinated from a young age, from kindergartens, to dream about this day. How can they do that? How can they slaughter other humans like animals? Even worse, they were torturing them, sexually abusing them. These are someone's daughters. These men still have their mothers crying as they think of the terrible fate that befallen their loved ones.
The bodies whose breasts were cut were found in several other locations. It depicts a pattern that could not have been unless it was premeditated and preconceived by Hamas themselves.
Premeditated, preconceived by Hamas himself, sexual crimes used as ways of humiliating your enemies, as breaking their morale. These savage, barbaric tactics are known. They've been done before by different barbarian warlords and tribes. When they kill their enemies, they impale them, they cut them, they rape them, they humiliated them. But these things existed in the medieval days. Actually, today they still exist. You know where? In Muslim countries. It's very sad to say that. Not all of them, but predominantly in Muslim countries. We still see that happening in Muslim countries in Africa. We're still seeing that happen in the Middle East. We're still seeing that happening in Europe by migrants. And we saw that by Hamas. Now, here comes my question. What would the UK do if that would have happened in London? If October 7 would have happened in London, if October 7 would have happened in Berlin, in New York City, an army of terrorists would have invaded your city on an early morning, slaughtering your people, beheading people with kitchen knives, raping mother in front of their children, burning babies alive. If that would have happened in your cities, in your countries, what do you think your country would have done? You would have been raging. Your country would have went to war and laid waste to the country that did that. On top of everything, they also kidnapped your children and they refused to give them back, and they keep saying they want to do that again to you. You would have went to war. The US would have supported you. NATO would have supported you. Everybody in the world would have came and said, just go and erase them from the face of this earth. That kind of evil should never exist again. And if they would have tried to pull that trick and telling you, oh, you're killing our children, what are you doing? You're baby killers. You would have not fallen for that. You would have held them accountable. Tell them, you know what? If you don't want your children to die, then stop using them as human shields. Stop hiding behind them. Come out of these holes and start fighting like real men. Let the women and children go to the bunkers when your men go and stand outside and face the consequences. Give us back our hostages. Give us back our children and surrender, because we will never let this happen again. But for some bizarre reason, you're allowed to defeat your enemies, but Israel is not allowed to defeat their enemies. When it's Israel, you always had to restrain yourself. You're not allowed to defeat your enemies. You're not allowed to defend yourself. Where is that double standard coming? Why when it happened to Jews, it's allowed, and the Jews are not allowed to defend themselves? It's crazy. The Jews were kicked out of England. The Jews were kicked out of Germany. The Jews were kicked out of Europe. The Jews were kicked out of Russia. The Jews were kicked out of Africa. The Jews were kicked out of Egypt, out of Libya, out of Sudan. The Jews were kicked out of every country in the world. And now the Jews are living in their only country, the Jewish country, the nation of Israel. A tiny, tiny country. I live there. I know how it is. The river to the sea is not a big distance. It's literally, you can walk it. It took me 3 days to walk from the river to the sea, and I was taking my time. That's how tiny that nation, and for some reason, the Jewish people are not even allowed to live in their own nation. And when they come and try to defend themselves from barbarian and savages like that, the whole world goes and start demanding ceasefire, start calling them baby killers. You know who's the baby killers? The one who are hiding and using their own babies as human shields. We haven't heard a single time that Hamas is coming and saying, okay guys, we're going to stop using our women and children as human shields. We are surrendering. Here we go. Stop attacking us. Take our weapons. Take the hostages. We're sorry. What we did is terrible. We're never going to do that again. But please stop fighting us. We surrender. We haven't seen that. What they're doing instead, they're actually glorifying. They actually want to see more children dead. They want to see more of their kids being murdered. They want to see more of their families crying in agony as a house exploded with the whole family inside of it because Hamas was shooting from that house. They want to see that. And you know why? Because they know it works on you. Because they don't care about children life. You do. And what they do is they're using it to abuse you and to make you pressure a ceasefire. Thank God there was not a Piers Morgan show during Nazi Germany, even Joe Rogan during Nazi Germany, because then they'll be calling about the proportion of that war and maybe we should have mercy on the Nazis. And until today would have probably been living with an active evil Nazi regime trying to go and murder people all across the globe. If it wasn't for strong and brutal generals on the Allies side that came and said, we're not stopping until they're completely destroyed, until that ideology is crushed to the ground, until we make sure that there's not even a single Nazi cell that is still working and plotting to advance Nazi ideology around the globe. They went and they completely crushed it. Yes, there is still today, but when you look at it, Germany became a very peaceful nation. One of the most peaceful, actually. From hating the Jews so much to becoming one of the biggest supporter of the Jewish state. That's insane. One of the places that actually Jews migrate to. There's a lot of Jews that are coming to Germany to live here because it became a great country. And why? Because the Nazi ideology was completely crushed and humiliated. So when Israel is right now fighting a similar barbaric religious Muslim Nazi ideology, the whole world is going calling ceasefire and blaming Israel for the death of these monsters and their children. Now, their children are not monsters. They're victims, absolutely. But who's in charge for their death? Them. Because if Israel wanted to kill children, how come they didn't kill children in Iran? How come they barely killed any child in Lebanon? They went and completely obliterated one, if not the strongest terrorist organization on the face of this earth. Hezbollah was considered the strongest terrorist organization on the face of this planet. They were stronger than some countries and their militaries, and Israel went and completely destroyed and dismantled them. Barely any civilian casualties or children. Israel went and crushed the Iranian regime military completely, humiliated them, almost destroyed them in 12 days, took down their entire command chain, destroyed their nuclear facilities, their bunkers, with barely killing any civilian and not children. Why? Because they were not looking to kill children. And luckily, these monsters over there haven't completely adapted the Gazan strategy of using their entire society as human shields. They haven't. They would if they could, but they haven't done it yet. So that's just a very good reminder of who are the kind of evil that we're fighting against, and why is it that everybody wants Israel to just restrain itself in order to save evil. Evil should be held accountable for its evil actions, not the West that is trying to fight it, not the good guys. Stay safe, don't do anything stupid, and see you next time.